Is AD5NL here, and if you follow me on Facebook, you know that I've been working on a kit here for the past several days. Let me go ahead and show you how it works. So my project has been the Tuna Tin 2 QRP transmitter. This is distributed by a group called QRP up in Maine, and they make a lot of kits that actually fit into, well, basically tuna fish cans. That's one of their I guess signatures. Of course, this kit was actually designed quite a while ago. It's almost, I guess, going on 40 years old. The design started with Doug DeMaul back in the 70s, who of course used the tin can for tuna fish the first time around, and then was later adapted by other groups. Now, tuna fish can might seem like a odd ingredient when you're cooking up a radio. I mean, it might remind you of Gilligan's Island when the professor makes a radio out of a coconut or something. But actually, I happen to have here Altoids tin, and these are pretty common actually for radios. Now, this isn't a radio, this is just a tin of mints, but if you see me sucking on Altoids, you might ask me if I'm planning on building something, and in fact, I did buy that with the intent of eventually turning that into something. So anyways, without further ado, here's the radio I built. I actually built it a little differently than is typical. It's a little bit more like this Mighty Dog transmitter here that KF2PH built using a dog food can actually. But let me give you a tour. This is my radio. I built it using a Chicken of the Sea can that I got at Walgreens, and I use this for sandwiches and also to feed my dog. It's got a few parts here. This is the line going to the antenna. Now, of course, for this testing, we're actually using a dummy load, which is really just a fancy resistor. The radio sees it as a perfect antenna, but the rest of the world sees it as a perfect, basically, energy sink that turns all the radio signal generated by this into heat, more or less. There's a little bit left over, which is where this radio receiver comes in, because that'll let us determine if the signal's clean or not. But anyways, moving around here clockwise, we've got the power connector. This is powered by about 12 volts, and so I'm using a gel cell that I used redeeming some points from Cabela's. This connector here is used to connect to a receiver. Now, I'm not going to connect it here because I want to make sure that the signal is clean and I don't want any stray energy going up this connector to the receiver directly. Now, this switch here is used to cycle between transmit and receive mode. There's no actual receiver circuitry in here. This just basically determines where the signal is going in terms of the antenna. So when it's in transmit mode, which is right, signal is going to be generated here and go out. When it's left, the signal is going to come down here and then go out to the receiver so that we can listen. And then, of course, center is dead. Just looking inside here, basically the guts of this transmitter are these two 2222 transistors. They're also helped along with this crystal here, which is set for 7.04, which is 7 megahertz, or 7040 kilohertz, 7.04 megahertz. And that's in the amateur 40 meter band. Then also in here we have some toroids and a transformer, a bifilial transformer. These are the first ones I've wound by hand. They're a little rough looking, but I'm proud of them because they're mine. And then finally, you'll note there's some stuff here that's not connected directly to the board. And this is a modification that will help us use a cleaner signal. It gets rid of what's called chirp. And there's an extra transistor in there some resistors, and a capacitor. So there's the guts here of the Tuna Tin 2. Finally, I've done a mod to increase the output power by putting a low value resistor in parallel with the higher value resistor that determines, it's R7 here, determines the output power. So this should put out about 400, maybe even 500 milliwatts when we've got it hooked up. So, without further ado, let's actually get to testing this guy. And given the way that I've laid it out with the jack here that goes to the paddles, which is how I send Morse code or CW, it actually kind of makes more sense to flip it upside down like this. So this is how we're going to operate it, and let's see what happens. So without further ado, let's go ahead and test this out. I'm going to use the paddles to sing a string of V's, as well as my call sign, AD5NL. So that's what you'll hopefully hear. Now I've got the receiver volume turned up and the paddle volume turned all the way down, just to the point where it's on. So any sound you're hearing is coming. Here we go. Okay, now you did hear a little bit of stray in there. I need to investigate the cause, but there you go. Working radio transmitter built out of a tuna fish can. That's my kit.